Hello listeners, we are your co-hosts Jeanine Bailey and Marie Quigley for the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. Empower World brings guests who are making a difference to the world to inspire coaches and leaders who lead with mind, heart and soul.
Hello and welcome listeners to the next episode of the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. My name is Jeanine Bailey and I'm here with the wonderful, amazing Marie Quigley, which is true.
Ditto for you too.
Oh, thank you. And I am calling in from the Wadawurrung country down south in Australia. And it's very early morning for me, 6 a.m. And usually it's the other way around. So it's nice to have this change, Marie. And yes. You're over on the other side of the world, as always.
And it's evening time, late evening time. We've got storms coming. So battening down to probably spend a few days inside.
And I'm going to get ready for the beach after this call. An early morning swim to wake me up even more. So listeners, thank you again for joining us. And we've got an interesting topic today. Marie, would you like to share what we're focusing on today in this podcast?
Absolutely. And the topic came up actually in a mentoring session I did with a group of new coaches that are moving towards credentialing. I was in session 2, I think, last week. And the topic came up about how one or two of the coaches felt they just got lost in the client. They couldn't come out of the client. They were enmeshed with the client's story. They had gone on in a session for over 2 hours because they didn't even look at the time. They were so entranced by the client's story and what was happening for them. And one of the coaches said, how do I stop myself doing it? And I said, actually, before we look at how we stop yourself, let's see how you get caught in. So I think it might be a good thing to talk about, Jeanine, is how do we get caught in the client? And how do we get hooked on their story or their emotion? How do we get so fascinated with them? And then maybe ways that we know we've used to step back, to remove ourselves from the situation, but still stay in presence with a client.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful and rich topic that you've brought in, Marie, based on that session that you had the other week. And it does bring me back to memories of being drawn in to my client stories as a new coach and potentially spending much more than an hour, maybe 2 hours, as I got caught in and wanted to support my client to create the awareness and achieve the goal that they wanted to achieve. And I recognize now that I hadn't learned the skills that I know now of how to manage my time, how to manage my, I don't know if manage is the right word, but how to support the client to really get to the heart of what's happening underneath the story, to be able to stay within the time frame that we've agreed to meet for. So it's a wonderful topic to dive into. And I you shared, Marie, let's look at, what perhaps draws us in. And if I reflect back again on my early experiences, the part of it wasn't being aware of, really setting these ways of working with the client. And the other part, a big part of it, was me wanting to give the best value I could for my client. I wanted my client to walk away with these magnificent ahas and ideas and commitments to create the transformation that they were seeking in their life. So I was giving, I was curious. I really wanted to support my client to create the best outcomes. And it meant that I really wasn't holding that principle that I really hold dear now, which is that my client is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. That's potentially the one main principle that I wasn't holding, that there was this desire for me to fix, and to potentially do some of the work, maybe more than some of the work for my client, in this desire to support them. So that's my own story of how I got drawn in, hooked into my client story, not looking underneath the story of what's really going on underneath emotions, body, beliefs, and so much more.
Thanks for sharing that, Jeanine. I mean, this is a common thing. As coaches, we really want to support our clients to have these fantastic ahas and walk away and tell the world, what an experience they've had. And sometimes it's the small moments of change or the small shifts in awareness that when the client leaves a session, that continues to grow, and perhaps the aha comes out later. Or maybe it's not an aha, maybe it's just a tiny little shift that allows them to create the change. And I resonate in so many things you've shared about, how initially as a new coach, you were giving in order for the client to get more. I recognize that in myself too. It's called having an agenda for the client. It's called wanting maybe even more for the client than they do. I remember one client early on said, I've got a feeling you want this more than I do. And we both burst out laughing as we recognized I did. I wanted her to succeed so much that I kept offering more time, giving her more space for reflection. Also, part of my part of my beliefs at the time was I was a new coach. So was I good enough? So maybe I'd give them a bit more time because I wasn't quite ready. Maybe I wasn't credentialed yet. I was on the way. Maybe I didn't think I was as good as somebody else who was credentialed or who had more experience. So perhaps I was comparing myself and wanting to do the best version of myself that there could be, but I was over giving. And what we've learned now is when we overgive, when we stay too long with a client, when the sessions go on and on and on time-wise, is we're forgetting that when the client is doing their own work, it's exhausting work for the client sometimes, especially when they're inside themselves, looking at their patterns of behavior, their emotional world, what's happening for them, how they're thinking, feeling, and experiencing. That's a journey in itself. Yeah. So I believe we have to respect the client, respect the time of the client, respect our time. I'm a really timely person, so I know when an hour is past. It's in my system. I know that time. So if I ignore that, I'm ignoring some of the ways I like to work, my boundaries. I'm disrespecting many things in the relationship, which may seem a bit strange because we think when we give more, it's better for the client, but it doesn't seem to be. And there was a story, I'm sure it was Oprah Winfrey, when she shared, she was invited to do a lot of speaking events for an hour. And initially they'd invite her after the event to come and mingle with people, and she would stay for hours at a time. And then one day she said, I am enough. I am enough with this hour. I'm giving everything in that hour that I can be as a professional, and now I'm going home. And I think that was created a big shift in my coaching early on, to recognize that whatever happens in the session, I am enough as a coach. And that principle that you talked about, that the client is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, and they will work out the answers.
Yeah. Beautifully shared, Marie. And I really want to pick up on that journey. You spoke about a journey, a client's journey, and that's it. It really is. Your client is going on a journey of discovery, and there are potentially many, many discoveries to make, and that it is a process, and that process and that journey also requires trust. Trust that your client, again, is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And it's just peeling back the layers and letting that unfold as it should, not all at once, although sometimes there can be these huge epiphanies for our clients, but often it'll be just delayering, revealing what's here, and focusing on, that initial awareness, or that creation of awareness with one of those layers that are coming off. If we, skip over those layers, we're potentially not really finding the richness that is within each one of those unpeeling of layers, if that makes sense, using that layer analogy. So it is a journey. So it is, again, trusting our client is there's going to be ongoing sessions. We trust that you've contracted with your client to do more than one session. And so everything is unfolding as it should. And that, again, each layer needs to be processed. Each layer will have so much richness of learning and wisdom and discovery within it. So I think, again, as a new coach, potentially we want to make it all happen very quickly. We really want to see our clients getting huge value. And again, as something that you shared, Marie, allowing our clients to walk away and to reflect upon what they're learning. There's going to be, I don't know how many times that has come up for myself when I've been coached or supervised as a coach or mentored. There's just so much more to discover when I walk away, so much more to reflect upon, and again, so much richness. So that word trust comes in, and recognizing that it is going to be a process, a journey for our clients that we work with to work towards the goals and the aspirations and dreams they want for themselves. And that's perfect. So if we hold that in place, again, it makes it so much easier to resist giving so much, and going back to the time you shared as well, Marie, because we've been coaching for many years, many hours, we have a real inbuilt sense of, I believe, listening to what you've shared, of what an hour is, or what 30 minutes is, or what 15 minutes is, whatever time frame you use. But I do know what supported me as a new coach was setting up my clock behind my client, pretty much directly behind my client, so that it was in some sort of peripheral, I hope I said that correctly, view, so that it wasn't looking obvious that I'd be looking at my watch.
Yeah.
So setting up a timing for yourself as a new coach that is easy to see will really support you to keep track of the time as a new coach. But the more you do, the more you become aware of the time that you spend with your clients.
Absolutely. And of course, if we're online now, you can look at the clock without the client. Yeah. Really, the client's doing their own work, so they're not often looking at you. So you can look at the clock. Another thing I suggested in the mentoring session was that you work in agreement with your client, and you agree that you have a timer that rings a lovely sound 10 minutes before the end of the session. So you can do that lovely closing off. And if you haven't heard our episode on closing off the session, it's really important to do that well. So go and have a listen to that. That lovely bell that says, okay, client, now is time to close off. With the client's permission, that could really help you understand the timing and manage it from that perspective. I want to go back on one point you mentioned about, and perhaps I mentioned it too in my thing, is that we don't always get massive ahas in the sessions, and it's okay. I did a demonstration of coaching in our current coach training cohort that was happening last weekend, and the client came with an unknowing. They were unknowing. It was they were unsure about something. And I didn't want to fix the unknowing. I didn't want them to find out anything. And so it was a demo of about 15 minutes. And the rest of the coaches came back and said, that was so good to see something that was just a dancing together, getting curious together, that there was no big boom aha. But we could see that the client was calibrating their learning with their breathing, with their body movements. So perhaps just the conversation allowed a new awareness, but it didn't emerge in the coaching session. I think that's so important to recognize as coaches.
Yes, absolutely, Marie. And again, that dancing, playing, getting curious, asking questions to support the client to continue to create further awareness, even though they haven't got the answer perhaps in that session, they will still walk away from that getting, we trust, getting curious about what does that mean for me, what's really underneath this for myself. So again, it's absolutely perfect to, I believe, our role as a coach is to support our clients to expand their awareness, expand to those places where they don't know. And that is the opportunity for growth.
And if you do want to extend, if you see that you're in a crucial time and you think, I have 10 minutes I can offer the client, then ask permission to extend. While you're coaching the client, you can say something like, I have some extra time to give you today. If you'd like to take it, we can do that. The client may actually say, I've got to go to a meeting, so I need to wrap up at our normal time. And they may say, thank you, I'm going to take that extra time. So of course you can be flexible. We're not saying you have to be rigid with this, but think about the impact for you getting lost in them. I'm swimming around at the moment. I'm using that metaphor of swimming. If you're swimming around with a client and you are not willing to step out, put the towel on, get dried and go home, then maybe that's not good for the client.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it is also an opportunity to look at ourselves when we notice that we're, when we are hooked on the story of our clients and that we are wanting to rescue, it is a good opportunity to sort of, again, take a step back to understand what's this about for me? What am I believing about myself or my clients? What is serving me, not serving me, serving the clients, not serving the clients? So it is a wonderful opportunity to understand more about who you are being as a coach and how you might be impacting the system that you're in with your client. So again, a wonderful opportunity. If you notice that that's your pattern, then again, it's a fabulous opportunity for growth.
Yeah. So some ways to help you stay with the client, but present for yourself in order to close off the session is remember your client is working with a professional as you are the professional. So having this container where you do know how long you've been with the client is really useful. It feels safe for the client to know that you can manage the time. So we call that taking charge of ourselves as professionals, not taking charge of the session, but who we're being in the work. Those tips that you gave, Jeanine, of checking the clock or putting it behind the client if you're in person and checking the screen if you're online. Maybe having a reminder that rings in or a sound or a piece of music that plays so that you can get used to the session endings and timings. So those are some of the ways that you can do that. Any other thoughts on what could be useful for people to think about, Jeanine?
I really believe it's also about, it's that trusting that principle. Our clients, so the principle that the ICF shares, our clients are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. So bringing that into the system and holding that is going to be really, I believe, powerful to not get caught up into the story and to look at, again, what's underneath the story so that you're bottom lining essentially the details. You're getting to the heart of the matter. And when you're going into the heart, that is when you can tap into your client's wisdom. What's the wisdom here? What's the learning here for you based on this story, based on what's going on underneath? And those ways of working, really contracting with your client to bottom line, to be able to work within the time frame, to perhaps give permission to work a little bit longer if that comes up and if we have time. But to, again, in that contracting to share that you trust that, you are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And my role as a coach is to support you to create greater awareness so that you are a choice to make empowered decisions. And so it's through that process that I'll be stretching you. So at the end of the session, it may still be a little bit foggy in terms of your commitments, but with that greater awareness, I'm trusting that you'll be able to, again, create, you'll be able to reflect and identify again, what is important to you, what it is that you want to do differently, who you choose to be, etc., etc. So,
yeah. Brilliant. Great tips there. So think about that. Also, I'm thinking, if it keeps coming up, you want to think about your own boundaries in coaching and maybe also in your life, because what happens in your life can be rolling into the coaching session as well. If you're a pleaser or if you're a rescuer and you don't have many boundaries, that could be part of it. And if you notice it keeps coming up, perhaps it's something you might want to bring to supervision so that you can reflect with your supervisor, or if you're in group supervision, reflect with your group to see who you're being in your work. That's a very, very useful thing to bring to think about.
Fantastic, Marie. And I don't know if you heard, but there were a couple of pings on my computer. So potentially that's the ping to say, time to wrap up.
Let's do that.
So thank you, listeners. We trust that you've got great value from this session about how we as coaches can support our clients to stay within the boundaries of time and not get caught up in the story, but instead to go underneath the story to support our clients to create even greater awareness about whatever it is they bring to our coaching sessions. So thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback. So please do let us know through the various social media channels, and any ideas for further podcasts we'd welcome. And if you got value out of this podcast, we invite you to share it with others, spread the word, because the world needs, I believe, and maybe you too, Marie, the world needs more coaches to support these interesting, very challenging times that we live in these days. So thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more about us on our website www.empower-world.com and on our social media networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. Be empowered.